Hello, everybody. This is Eric Parker with One Number, and in today's video, we're going to dive into Power BI for Tableau users. So, if you are journeying into the world of Power BI, but your kind of business intelligence and analysis background is more in Tableau, this will hopefully be a perfect video for you to give you a ton of information about just how Power BI works. We'll be digging into a bunch of core functionality, but to add a little bit of commentary and compare and contrast to Tableau, right? To be able to say, well, you're used to doing this in Tableau, we're going to do it like this in Power BI. So maybe you are just building these skills on the side yourself for, marketability. That's amazing. Maybe your organization has said, we're moving to Power BI, and now you got to learn this stuff. So hopefully this is a really helpful jumping off point. This is not looking at every feature of Power BI. This is not doing a full scale comparison of these two tools, although there, again, will be some commentary as we go. If you need help beyond this video, let us know. I've got my email down here in the corner of the screen, and we'll put some information in the description below as well to where you can contact us if you need anything. So let's look at an example of what we will be building together. And the hope is that if you want to build with me, then you can. Okay, I'm going to provide all the info that you need to be able to do that. Okay, so here it is. This is called unprofitable transaction analysis. We'll be providing some different resources for you. We'll provide a place where you can download this exact report if you want to. Now, this is actually using Tableau's example dataset Superstore, which we will also be providing a link to. If you have it already, you can probably use the copy you have, and it should be very similar. If you don't have that, that's okay. We are going to provide that as well. So check out the description below for where to download that. Okay, to get this party started, let's open up a new copy of, or a new instance of Power BI. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm working off of standard Power BI desktop. The great news about this is if you have a Microsoft account, whether you're a student or pay for it by yourself, you have access to this. So we're not doing anything that requires a paid upgrade today. That's the great news. We'll provide a link in the description to where you can download this. Okay, so I'm going to be connecting to an Excel workbook, and I'm going to be connecting to Superstore, Sample Superstore. Okay. Like I said, we are providing a link to this, so feel free to download that to be able to follow along and then connect to it wherever you put that file. All right. So you can see here, this is a display showing me that, okay, we've connected to this Excel workbook, and then here are the three sheets in that workbook. I'll probably use the term sheets and tables interchangeably. So we have the orders table, we have the people's table. Those are the two that I want us to work with primarily today. So let me go ahead and put a check both next to orders and people. Okay. And so a couple options here. We can either say load, and that'll take us directly into sort of Power BI's main interface where we can start building visuals and putting reports together, or there's this option to transform data. Okay. Now we're going to do transform data because there are a couple of minor things that we're going to want to do to these tables. So let me go ahead and select that. Okay. Power BI is taking a moment. It's going to go ahead and load those. All right, so we now have our two primary tables that we'll be working with, orders and people. Now, let's first talk about orders because this is really sort of the primary data source. If you're familiar with sort of classical data terms, orders is pretty much our fact table. So this is where all our numeric information or our measures are that we want to analyze. Okay, so just maybe to give you a quick background on just what is Superstore, in case you haven't really worked with this much before. Think about it like Sears, or if that's too dated of a reference, maybe Amazon. They sell furniture and office supplies and computers and phones. So if you scroll to the right, you will see information about that, right? Who bought this? Where were they? How much did this thing cost? How much money did we make? So that's a little bit of just the general background of what you'll find in orders. And then for people, this is just going to help us convert the name of a region to who is the manager of that region. Okay, so we'll just make two small transformations here, one for each table. Power Query is very powerful. If there's more that you want to do with this tool, then absolutely you can do that. We can do future videos on that. So Power Query it's maybe a little bit hard to make a Tableau comparison, but I would say it's a little bit Tableau prep. And all the data transformations that you can do there. And it's a little bit that data source tab that you first have in Tableau where you do things like set up joins or do splits, pivot columns. Those are the same types of things that Power Query is designed to do. Right. So let's go ahead and just look at maybe one brief example of how we could use it to help us out with our orders table. So I select discount. All right. I'm going to go to transform. And right now it just says the data type is a decimal number. But instead I could say, you know what, actually this is a percentage, right? So discount is just what percent off did we give on this transaction, right? So 20%, 80%. So let's go ahead and do this. I'll select percentage. It says, are you sure you want to do that? Sure, let's replace the current step. And now you can see, we might want to kind of cut some of the decimals off later, but it has now converted discount to be a percentage. Okay, that's good. Now, again, there's tons of stuff you can do here. You can see all these different things that might be of interest, but we're keeping it simple for now. So next up, we will go to our people table. And then an interesting challenge here is that the names of our columns are column 1 and column 2, when in reality, they should be region and regional manager. The good news is that Power BI makes this very easy. Let me go back to our home tab actually. And in the home tab, there's an option that just says use first row as headers. That sounds good to me. So let's give that a shot. And there we go. Now I've just got region and regional manager as the names of these columns. All right. So when we're happy with the transformations that we made in Power Query, what we can do is say close and apply up here in the top left corner, and then that will take us into Power BI's main interface. And we can always come back here. So it's not a concern if there's another change we want to make down the road, very easy to pop back in. So let's go ahead and hit close and apply. Okay, so after we hit close and apply, we end up in the main Power BI view like this. And because I'm a dork, we're going right back to Power Query because I forgot to write a calculation that I intended to. So the good news is to get back to Power Query, we're just going to hit this button here on our toolbar, transform data. And guess what? We're right back to Power Query. Okay, so what I intended to do here before closing it was to write a measure that we're going to use. And so what we're going to do for this is we're going to create a column which allows us to determine if a transaction is profitable or if that transaction is unprofitable. All right. So in the toolbar at the top, we're going to hit this add column section. Okay. And for this scenario, we're going to create a conditional column. All right. So what I'm going to do is just call this profitable. Delete the end off there. Okay, profitable / unprofitable. All right, so now I get to use this helper. Now there are a number of ways to, create calculated columns in Power BI. So we're just looking at one of those right now. We'll look at another one later. So in this scenario, I would say, okay, the column name I want to reference is profit. Okay, so down here at the bottom, if the profit is greater than 0, then it should say profitable. And then this is just only two options, profitable or unprofitable. So then I just need to say else unprofitable, right? If you want to add additional clauses, you can do that here. If you're breaking it down by 3 or 4 different buckets, that's an option, but we're keeping it simple. So we'll do this, we'll hit OK. And now I've got this extra column here called profitable, unprofitable. And then we can just do kind of a quick check. So this is $4.27 profitable, -$64 unprofitable. So cool. It seems to be doing what we would hope. And then this isn't something we're going to get into in a lot of details, but I just think it's a cool feature of Power Query that as you are making changes and creating new steps, it's actually logging those for you over here. So you can do things like delete or remove them. There are oftentimes options to like rename them so you know what the step is if the default title is a little bit ambiguous. So that's really nice. All right. So let's go back to home and we're going to hit close and apply again. And now we're going full circle here. Looks like it's going to take a minute to load all our changes and we're good to go. So right now we are in the report view. That's what this little bar chart looking icon over here is. We are going to be doing a lot of work in the report view today, but that's not where we're going to start. I want to kind of stick with getting our data the way that we want it to be before we start building the visuals. Not that it has to be that linear. You can always come back, but just the way that my brain works, I guess just like full scale, I like to work with somebody, ask questions, help determine what the purpose is of what we're doing, sketch out what it is that we're going to do, and then start to work on the data, and then eventually kind of build out what it is that we're going to do, right? So let's go to the second section here, which is called the table view. Okay. So the table view, it's kind of an interesting middle ground. It's not quite Power Query, but it's also, you don't feel like you're in the end Power BI interface. So let's look at a couple of things that we can do and use the table view for. Okay, so let's go to our measures first of all. So notice we've got things like sales, profit. We could format these as currencies here if we'd like. So if I go to my sales column, notice that it automatically went to the column tools section. It's called sales. If I want to rename it, I could. What is this? Right now it's a decimal number. I think that makes sense. What format do I want? It's a currency, so let's go ahead and do that. And then this down here where it says auto, this is your number of decimal places. So like sometimes it's 2 decimals, sometimes it's 1. I think that just 2 decimals across the board would be nice. So let's go ahead and put that in. And then let's do the same for profit. I don't know why profit is going out to 4 decimals in a lot of places. So same deal. Let's change this to currency and let's set this to be exactly 2 decimals. Okay, and discount, let's check that one out while we're at it. Let's make sure that it is formatted to have a percentage on the end. So we add percentage, 2 decimals. You know what, actually, I don't think there's ever decimals. I think it's always like a full percentage point. So let's set that one to 0 decimals. All right, that's good. Now, something else that's interesting, I don't know what it's sorted on actually, but the row IDs should start at row 1 and work its way through roughly 10,000. So something that we might want to do here is hit this drop down and then choose to sort ascending. So it starts with row 1. Okay. And then if we want to rename a column, so let me find, okay, this thing here called segment. Maybe I just want to clarify that, hey, this is a customer segment, not a product segment. So if I hit the drop down, oh, I'm sorry, not the drop down there. Rather, I'm going to rename it up here, the top left. Okay, let's just start from scratch. Call that customer segment. And there we are. Okay. And then, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of places that you can create new columns in Power BI. This is another one of those places. So if I said new column here, for example, right, I could say something. I'll just do an example. I don't know this is something that we would actually use, but maybe I would say something like, if my sum of profit is greater than 0, then give me a 1. I'm sorry, actually, I want to do less than 0. Less than 0, then give me a 1, else give me a 0. And what I'm going to call this thing, instead of just the default name column, I'll call this, unprofitable transaction, right? So it'll return a 1 if it is an unprofitable transaction or a 0 if it's not. Let's see how that turned out. So all of these are showing up as zeros, which, yeah, seems not ideal. So I would probably need to go back and troubleshoot that formula a little bit, but this gives you sort of the general idea of what you can do here. Now, what you're doing in this scenario, because I didn't use the helper, you are using, I suppose you're using Power BI's DAX calculation language. Okay, so my recommendation is, if you're new to that, it's a whole own area of study. So it's definitely worth getting familiar with and comfortable with. And then that is a great one to be able to leverage, like Copilot or some other AI tool. If you just want to ask, hey, how do I write this sort of formula, but do that in Power BI? And it'll either give you the correct formula or something close that you can modify. Okay. So that's the general idea with the table view. Now, we don't need to say something like close and apply like we did from Power Query. That stuff is just automatic. So like if I leave and if I come back, hey, this unprofitable transaction thing I created is still here. My number formats are still here. Okay. One more thing that we are going to do before we dive into the visual side of this is to look at what's called the model view. So let's go ahead and tab over to that. All right. So in the model view, this is where you are defining how does the relationship work between multiple tables, right? So in this case, you can see I've got a people table and I've got an orders table. So it's actually already set up a relationship here for us. So if we select that, we'll get a chance to see what this is. And so in this case, it says, hey, the relationship is between region from the orders table and region from the people table. It's many to one, and it's a single direction relationship, and it's active. Okay, so that's great. I think it's actually exactly the way we would want it. So really, we don't need to make any changes right now. But just to show you that, in case a relationship didn't automatically populate with some data that you're working with, let me delete this and just show you that if you want to set up a relationship from scratch, you can do it like this. So I would take region from people and then drag and drop it onto region from orders. So it says, hey, is it this? Is it this? Is this the cardinality that you want? So cardinality is just basically like, should this row only find one match, or could it find multiple matches? And that's what we're saying here. Yeah, of course, we could have 100 or 1,000 transactions in the West region. Okay, so we'll hit save, and then it's good to go. If you ever have multiple things, like this is a bad example, but if I was like, hey, regional manager equals, I don't know, product name. So you could do that as well, and it will actually show you that there are multiple connections. So that's actually not a good connection there. So let's get rid of that. But I just want to show you that if there are ever multiple fields that you want to relate on, then you can. Okay, hopefully I have left the correct relationship intact. I think it is the region to region one. I see that over here. So I'm going to assume that we are good. And now we are finally going to pop back over to our report view, and then we'll get started kind of setting up our report and the visuals. Let's just sort of set the stage for some of the default formatting that we might want to apply in this view, right? So one of the first things that would be interesting would be just how do you change the size of your report, right? So let me collapse the data pane for now, because we don't need that right away. And what I'm going to do is go over to this tab here called Format Your Page, okay? So this is here in the Visualizations breakout. And in here, we can go to Canvas Settings, okay? And you can see that the default size is a 16:9, so you could choose a different default size. If you wanted to kind of do tall and skinny, you could go 4:3. But in my case, I'm actually going to go with a fully custom size. So let me do that. And what works well for my screen would be something like 850 in height by, let's call it 1400 in width. Okay, and then you can see that pretty well maximizes my screen real estate, but feel free to optimize that for whatever works best for you. And then for our canvas background, if we want to have something other than just the standard white background, this is a quick place that we could go to change that. So for example, maybe on color, I'll just pick sort of the lightest gray shade possible. So if you click that and you're like, wait, I clicked it and nothing changed, it's not you, you're not crazy. Power BI is crazy, right? So what you need to do here is actually turn the opacity or the transparency down, I should say. So if I crank that down to 0, you'll see, oh, okay, there's the gray shading that I added. Now, if you're real fancy, you could add images as your background. So if you want to have some sort of custom texture, you can do that. I don't know if it's worth it. It's up to you, right? It's up to what your users want, what you think is best for them. Okay. So there you go. So sort of a couple of core things that you might do to set yourself up. And then let's say I want to add a title to this, right? So what I'm going to do in this scenario is here, I'm in the Home tab. I have not navigated away from it. I am going to insert a text box. All right. So let me do that. And then let's get fancy with this. So I'll call this my unprofitable transaction analysis. Okay, let's make that text much bigger. I'll be doing a little experimentation here, so I don't know exactly what I want yet, but I mean, 32 looks pretty good off the jump, so maybe I'll try that. I'll make this a little bit wider. Now, the cool part is if I want to go a little custom here, like if I want to make the unprofitable section red specifically, then I can just do that. Okay. And then notice the background of this text object is white. So if I want to leave it like that, that's fine. I don't, honestly. So what I'm going to do in this scenario is kind of go over to formatting again. And then let's look into what some of our options are here. So specifically, if we go into effects, you can see there's some background, right? So I might say, instead of the color being white, maybe I'll pick like a slightly darker shade of gray than the dashboard is by default. So Yeah, that seems to work all right for me. Okay. Cool. So there you go. We have sort of set up some defaults. We'll get a little bit more into formatting at the very end as well. So this is sort of our initial jump into formatting. We'll do a little formatting on each individual worksheet as we go, and then we'll kind of come back and wrap things up at the end of this with some other big picture formatting, like adding borders and things of that nature. All right. So next on our list is to build some visuals. All right. So one thing I just noticed, this is going to annoy me if I don't deal with it now, is let me just make sure that that text box is as wide as our view. And now we'll dive into building these visuals. Let me expand my data pane again, because this is going to come in handy as we build these visuals. Now, maybe just a quick visual reminder of what it is that we're creating. It's going to be something like this. So the way that I count this, we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 core worksheets. There are a couple of cards. There are a couple of filters. So we've got some work cut out for us. This is really where we're going to make our money today. All right. So let me pop back over to this, and maybe we'll start with the bar chart. I feel like that could be kind of a nice entry point. So when you want to kick off a visual in Power BI, there are a couple of key ways to do that. You can click directly on the visual you want to create and then choose your data fields, or you can choose your data fields, see what visual Power BI chooses for you, and then change it as necessary. So you may sort of be looking at this and realizing this is a little different than Tableau, right? In Tableau, you create individual worksheets and then you compile them on a dashboard. In Power BI, you're typically starting in the report, or sort of the dashboard, the endpoint itself, and then creating the visuals that are all going to work together within that report, right? So for example, check this out. If I am looking for loss by region, I might do something like this. I'm going to hit the checkbox next to my profit field in my data pane. And I'm going to hit the checkbox next to my region field. It came up with this bar chart. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Definitely not the best. So it's okay. It went for a vertical bar chart, but instead maybe we'll go for a horizontal bar chart, or what this visual here is called a stacked bar chart. So if we do that, yeah, we're going to need to do some resizing, but it's not terrible, right? So we've got this worksheet. I'm going to worry about my worksheet sizing and all that stuff closer to the end. I'm just going to kind of build everything first. And so, great, we have this initial view, but we're still a ways off of what we really want this to be. Okay, so first of all, this is showing me actual profit by region. So it's saying like, hey, you made $110,000 in the West region. But the way that I'm thinking about what we're building is we are going to be only showing data from unprofitable transactions. So just counting stuff where we lost money, what happened, right? So in order to do that, I need to filter this worksheet. Now, the good news is we have a filter pane, right? So I can add a filter to this visual. Notice there are some other options about adding filters to other pages as well. We're not dealing with that, just for this visual. So our handy field profitable, unprofitable that we created way back in Power Query is going to be super helpful now, right? So I'm going to drag and drop that to where it says add data fields here. And I'm going to say, just give me my unprofitable transactions, right? And so notice that now, instead of the West region saying we made $110,000, now it's saying we lost $22,000. Okay. So let's sort this so that the, biggest loss, the region losing the most money, is sorted to the top. I'm going to hit the more options here, and then there's an option called sort axis. Right now it's sorting descending, so high to low, but we want to sort ascending, low to high. So it flips the order of our bars. All right. Now we want to customize some different things about this worksheet. So let me, or this visual, I should say. So let me kind of talk about a few things we're going to do. We'll edit the title. We'll get rid of the axis because we're going to add labels to the end of each bars. I probably don't need this sub-label for the region axis. So those are a few customizations that we will dive into here now. So let's say I want to make all these bars red. Really quick before we do that, if I wanted to make each region its own color, notice that there's a section here called Legend. Okay, so this is just one of the shelves that you can use. If I put region on the Legend shelf, notice that what it will do is it will make each region bar its own color, which is handy. It's not what we're doing now, but I just wanted to show that in case you have a visual where you need to do something like that. Okay, so for most of the transformations that we're going to be doing, we're going to pop over here to this tab, Format Your Visual. Okay, and let me think about where we want to start with this. Let's go to General, because in General, we can update the title. Okay, so I'll hit this drop down, and instead of it kind of going with the default name of sum of profit by region, I could rename this title here. So I could say something like loss by region, which would work. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I don't think I need anything else immediately there. Oh, shoot, I clicked out and it came back in. So let me go back to the format your visual section again. So let's go ahead and use this checkbox down here to turn our data labels on. Right, so notice that previously our bars did not have a label. Now they do. Okay, let's go ahead and edit our axes. So region is going to be our y-axis. I do want to show the values, like I need to be able to see the region name. So let's leave that toggled on, but I don't need it to say region because the worksheet title already says region. Okay, and then let's go to our x-axis. And because we have those labels on the bars now, I'm all about saving space and getting rid of unnecessary text. So let's just turn both the values and the title for that axis off. Okay, so the x-axis is looking pretty good in that scenario. Right. And then one other thing that we might want to do in this menu is I can hit the drop down for the bars, and specifically what I want to do there is change the colors. So it went with this default blue color. If we hit that drop down, we can instead pivot it to be a red that matches the red that we used in the title. All right, so not bad. We have built and customized our first visual here in Power BI. All right, so next up, we are going to create the donut chart. All right, so to create this donut chart, let's do this. First of all, make sure you click off of your bar chart. Otherwise, any changes that you make might accidentally change that sheet instead, that visual. So let me go ahead and click on the donut chart visual over here. I've added a few custom visuals, so your list may look slightly different, but it should largely be the same. I'm only going to use kind of the standard visuals today. So I click on donut chart, and so this one we're creating a little bit differently than we did with the bar chart, right? So with the bar chart, I clicked on the fields first, and then it sort of auto-created that. This time I'm going to show you how do we create this visual by dragging the fields from the data pane in order to get them where we want, right? So for the donut chart, two things. I want a count of transactions. So there's not exactly a transaction ID in this data source. There's an order ID. That's a little messy because an order ID could be one row or it could show up on several rows if there were multiple items in an order. So what I would rather do is use row ID because every row should have a row ID and they'll all be unique. And what I can do is take row ID and then I'm going to drag and drop it on values. Okay. So it starts off though by saying count of row ID, which is not ideal, but that's okay. And then once again, our handy dandy profitable, unprofitable column that we created, we're going to drop that on legend. And now what we've got, let me zoom in on that so you can see it a little better. I've got the beginnings of this donut chart that we're going to create. So this is just called count of ID, count of row ID by profitable, unprofitable. So once again, we have quite a few transformations to make here before this is going to be, really good to go. Okay. One of the first ones I want to show you is we probably will totally customize the title of this in a minute. But if you're generally good with the title of a visual, but you want something small tweaked, like instead of count of row ID, I really want that to say like transaction count. Something that you can do is go to that field on the shelf and then say rename for this visual. Right, so that's kind of cool because I could say something like transaction count by profitable, unprofitable, which it's a little clunky, but it's not terrible. Right. What I would probably rather do is just kind of go full custom title. Right, so I'm going to go to general, go to title, and I'll say, unprofitable transaction breakdown. Misspelled transaction. Lovely, I think. Oh, maybe not. Hey, I think I'm actually good. All right. Give myself too hard of a time over here. So I think, yep, there we go. Our title took. All right. Some other tweaks that we may want to make to this. Let's go ahead and customize our colors. So if I go back to the visualization window, go to format your visual, slices, color. So this is there's a little bit of a click tax that comes with customizing these colors, right? So unlike Tableau, where you can kind of pull up the color legend and set them all at once, it's sort of one at a time here. So what I mean by that is, so I might go here and click on profitable, and then what do I want this to be? I want this to be maybe sort of a I might want to make it one shade darker. It's getting a little lost with the background color. So that's what the profitable slice will look like. But then if I go to unprofitable, then I can set that one to be that default red that I want to use. Okay. And then, so let me go ahead and close that up. And then in my legend, I do like having the legend, very helpful, but I don't know that I need a legend title because I think it's, somewhat implied by everything else that we're seeing. So let me go ahead and turn the title of the legend off and just leave the actual legend itself. Okay, cool. So now my donut chart is in pretty good shape. Just looking at it. Yeah, I think we're good there. So now we can move on to our text table and our line graph. All right, so let's go ahead and build a text table. All right, so what we'll go ahead and do here is select our table style visual. And this is just going to be loss by product, right? So some of our same skills from our previous sections will apply. Now we only have this one shelf here called columns. So what we can do is grab, let's say, our product field, drop it on columns. And then I'm going to grab my profit field, also put that on columns. Okay. And then this will get interesting. So I want to filter this by that profitable, unprofitable field again, and just keep our unprofitable transactions. Okay. And let's look at this here. Okay, so I want to rename this column sum of profit. I'm just going to hit the drop down and rename for this visual, and I'll call this loss. So the benefit here is that, yeah, in the eventual title to this table, it'll show up as loss, but also just even in this individual column here. Now, if I want to sort it by the products that lost the most money first, one of my ways of doing that is by actually selecting this loss header. Let me expand this visual a little bit. So it defaulted to, the highest values first, highest being $0. Well, let me instead sort it like this. So now it's going to be the, biggest losers first. So you can see if I scroll in there or zoom in there, Cubify printer, there are over $9,000 lost on unprofitable transactions. Okay. Now, as far as some customizations, maybe we want to show a title, right? So I'll go into format my visual and go into general. Let's turn our title on, and I'll call this loss by product. Okay. And then another interesting question here is just, do you want to keep that total bar at the bottom? Now, by default, I think that having totals can be kind of nice. However, you might want to get rid of it. And actually what we're going to be doing eventually, just to show you this, is creating a card that'll tell us our overall loss. So because of that, that feels a little redundant, and I think we're going to be tight on space regardless. So let's go ahead and go into our formatting. I'm going to be in the visual section, go to totals, and just turn the totals off. Okay, so now we're just looking at the loss by product. Okay, and then next up, let's go ahead and just dive straight into building a line graph, right? So let me go ahead and select line graph as another chart type. So this one gets kind of interesting because this will be our first time working with a date field, but it's okay. It should go pretty well, I think. So we'll do a couple of things here. So our x-axis should be our date field. So I could hit the drop down and order date. It's a default hierarchy. So I think if I just grab and drag it all the way out there, it'll just pull the whole hierarchy on there, or I can check on one at a time what I want. So let's say I want to look at loss by quarter. If I just take order date and drag and drop it onto the x-axis, it pulls on everything year, quarter, month, day. If I pull profit and put it on the y-axis, okay, looks like so. So it says that year, quarter, and month are on there, but it really looks like it's pretty much just year to me. I think I know what it was. I had to drill down to the next level from there, but something else I could do as well is just drag quarter on here. And now you can see that it is definitely a quarterly level visual. So what I was saying about that drill down is because this is a date hierarchy, we have these options about, do I want to drill up? Do I want to drill down? Which, can be kind of nice depending on, how it is that you want to do that. So I kind of liked the view where it was just going straight to the quarterly view without you having to select anything else. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. And let's think. Okay, we need to filter this by profitable, unprofitable. Once again, it's back. Let's put this on here, select only unprofitable. All right. And then let's do some other formatting. So let's go into the format section here. For the line, I'm going to turn it red. You're probably getting kind of comfortable with how this works now. So if I go to line, if I go to color, hit the drop down, set it to this red that we've been using. And then let me think of what else I would want to show. I do want to update the title, so let's go ahead and do that in the general section. Hit the drop down here. I'll call this just loss by, I could either say quarter or, yeah, I think it'll be clear. I was going to say quarter/year, but I think it's going to be clear enough by just saying quarter. People will understand if they hover over that, especially what each of those means. All right, so we're looking pretty good there. And then the last thing I was thinking about is the x-axis. It defaulted to calling it year because year is the first date field that was on there, but that feels a little confusing to me. So maybe that would be helpful to update that title as well, right? So we could say something like, quarter/year. Maybe that would be the most appropriate. Oh, shoot, did I do the wrong axis? What have I done? All right, well, this is, yeah, I went to the y-axis or the x-axis. So back arrow time. The good news is we've got back arrows. So if I need to get out of there, I can. I might just want to set it back to whatever it was. Might be easier. I don't know how far back I need to go to get this the way that I want. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to set this back. I'm just going to call that loss. And then now let's go to our x-axis. And this is where I'll update the title and set that to quarter year. All right, let me just do a quick spot check and make sure I didn't mess anything else up when I was doing those back arrows there. Like, I think the rest of my visuals look good. I think we're looking pretty good here. So I'm going to say that we are in good shape and we are good to start creating the cards and the slicers. All right, let's dive into building some cards then. So card is this visual type here. It's a little square with a 1, 2, 3 in it. When we talk about a card in Power BI, that's very similar to what you would call like a summary tile or a KPI tile in Tableau. But I think you will see that they're actually a little bit easier to create in Power BI, and definitely easier to create multiple of them once you've got one. So let's go ahead and click on card. Okay. And now that I've got this here, the first thing I want to do is to create a card that counts the number of unprofitable transactions, right? So what I'm going to do is grab my row ID field, which is sort of our stand-in for transaction count. We drop it on the field section here in the visualizations pane. It tells us there are 10,000 total row IDs, but a couple of things. Let's filter this down to just the unprofitable ones. So I take my profitable, unprofitable field and drop it to where it says add data fields here. And we just keep unprofitable, right? And then we need to customize it. So instead of saying count of row ID, let's hit the drop down and rename that field. So it says unprofitable transaction. Maybe just transactions to save a little space. Okay, so then one other little tweak that I like to do is just sometimes I like to change the color of the callout value. So essentially just the number here, right? So if I go to format, there's a section for callout value or label. We just want callout value, and then we hit the drop down here. We make it red. Now I can see that the number changed without the label color changing. Okay, so that's it, right? Pretty easy to create our card. And then, okay, so let me move a couple things around. I'm going to shift everything down a little bit to make some space at the top for our cards. Now, the nice thing is if I want to create another card that has really similar formatting, check this out. I could just copy and paste this card and make a couple of small tweaks. So I'm going to Control C, Control V. Okay, so I've just copied that card on the fly. And then this one, instead of it just being the unprofitable transaction count, I want this to be the actual, loss, the dollars lost. So let me go ahead and flip back to the add data to your visual section here. Now that I've got the second card selected, and I'm going to take profit and drop that over the top of where our row ID was. And now you can see here, it says, the profit dollars now. So a couple things, let's rename the sum of profit field to just loss for the sake of this visual. Okay. And then the other piece is, oh yeah, I was thinking about, I probably don't need 2 decimal places. That feels like a lot. So let's go ahead and go to format your visual, and in the callout value section, the decimal places are automatic by default, but if we just hit the down arrow there, it'll just say 157K without the decimals. All right, so there we go. Now we've got ourselves a couple of cards at the top of our report. All right, let's create some slicers, or what we would typically call filters in Tableau. So what we're going to do here is there's actually a visual type that we need to select. There it is, called slicer. It's got a little funnel icon on it. This kind of threw me for a loop when I first learned Power BI, because in Tableau, you create the filter at the worksheet level, you add it to the dashboard. So the whole process is a little different, but I definitely wasn't expecting a slicer to be like its own separate visual selection in Power BI. So that's a little something new for you. So we select slicer, and then we need to choose a field that would go in there. So for the first time, we're going to be using this people table. So if I go down to people, I'm going to put regional manager as my field. So I say, put this here. Now let's do a little customization to this because it is functional, right? I can go in here and I can select some of these regional managers, which is nice. But a couple of things. So let's go into our format and hit the slicer settings dropdown. Right now it's called a vertical list, but I am a big proponent of dropdown as the primary filter type. I think that's just what people are, generally used to, whether they spend a lot of time in Tableau or Excel or Google Sheets. Like that's just sort of the gold standard. So if I hit dropdown, you'll see that it looks something like this, where it's the same type of thing. You can make selections, but then if I hit the dropdown, it collapses again. And then under selection, I like having an all option. It's kind of nice, right? So then that way there's no confusion about like, wait, is everybody selected? Is nobody selected? So if I hit select all, now everybody's selected. But now if I just click on one person like Chuck McGee, it's just them. Okay. So there you go. That's our first slicer. So maybe just in the interest of time, we'll just make one more. But of course, you can create many on your own if you want to. So once again, let's copy and paste, because the good news is now that I've set those settings for regional manager, if I just want to make another slicer that, let's say it's a customer segment, right? So let me go back to my add data to your visual, and let's put customer segment in here in place of regional manager. Get regional manager out of there. Check this out. So the fact that it's a drop down, the fact that there's a select all button is here, that still applies, which is nice, right? So I think this has been one of my biggest gripes about Tableau for forever. I'm like, can we make creating filters and making them all the same style easier? I love how easy that is, that you can just copy and paste a slicer, and then all those kind of formattings and settings that you've done will apply. All right, so let's do this now. I'm going to go ahead and kind of line these up a little bit, sort of as best I can. I want to add a little title there that just tells the user that these are filters. So let me add a text box, and I'll just do this. Okay, filters. Let me make this bold and centered. Now, by default, this text box has a background, which I don't think I want. So then once again, we're going to go over to let me look here, into effects, I believe. There we go. And then for color, I guess it doesn't really matter what the color is, as long as we turn transparency to 100. It looks like that, which is pretty good. So now I just want to work on the lining it up a little bit. All right, and this thing is it's in pretty good shape, right? We've got these functional filters, and I think one other just comment I should make while we're on the topic of filters is that, typically in Tableau, if you want a worksheet to filter a dashboard, you have to create a dashboard action to do that. But in Power BI, that is just native functionality, right? So what I mean is I've clicked on the West region down here in my bar chart and notice that all of my other worksheets have actually filtered according to my selection. So that's just, it can be handy, and it's also just good to know that that is the default behavior. All right. So next up, let's look at maybe some final formatting that we could apply to this report. You can lose hours in the world of formatting, and sometimes it can be a valuable thing, right? The fact having curb appeal for your reports is really important for people to think that they're interesting and to want to get into them and to want to spend time there. People don't generally want to spend time in things that they think are not very functional or not very good looking, or appalling to the senses. And so we're not going to get really deep on that right now, but we will get into it just a little bit, right? So One example of that would be, what if you want to add some borders to your objects and maybe specifically rounded borders, right? That's kind of what's in right now. That's what's sleek. So you can do that one object at a time, right? I can go to an individual object and go into formatting. And there will be a section where you can edit the borders of your objects. And, we probably will do a little bit of this one-off stuff. But if you want to add borders to all your objects or most of them, let me show you a quick way of doing that, which is called view. Now, view is interesting because there's all kinds of, default, what you would call like formats that you can apply. So just to show you an example of that, let me click on one of these and you will just see that like Power BI will choose color palettes. Now I haven't like put a ton of fields on color, I guess, so maybe I'm not seeing it as much, but those are kind of nice and you can actually create your own custom views. But let me do this. I'm going to hit the drop down here on themes and I'm going to go to customize current theme and I'm just in the default theme. And one of the cool things I could do here, right, not only just changing what are some of the default colors, but if I go to visuals, there's a section here for border. And watch this. I'm going to turn border on. I don't probably want that dark of a gray, so I might choose sort of like a medium gray. And then I'm going to add, I'll call it a 10 pixel radius. Okay. Now keep an eye on this bar chart maybe specifically as I do this, and I'm going to go ahead and select apply. And notice that now I have this sort of light gray border and it's rounded, right? That's what the radius does. The radius kind of adds that little bit of rounding around it, okay? Which, I think it looks pretty sleek. Now, there are some things where adding that rounding and the border probably doesn't make a ton of sense, like the filters text box. You might look at that and say, well, that's a little janky looking. So let me select that one as an example. And then there we'll go into effects and I'll just turn the visual border off. Maybe the same thing for my overall title. The border can go off there. I think it's relatively appropriate everywhere else. I could see an argument for taking it off of the slicers, but I think it's fine overall. So there you go. This is just, one example of some visual formatting that you can apply to your report. All right. First, give yourself a huge pat on the back because in less than an hour, you've potentially gone from knowing nothing about Power BI to creating a pretty slick report that you have in front of you now. And you've learned a ton about the functionality that you need to be able to be successful in your own projects going forward. All right. So if this video was helpful to you, we'd love to hear about that, right? We'd love to hear what about it worked well for you. If you have further questions, please do drop those in the comments below. If you have suggestions for additional content that you'd like to see covered, we would love to hear that as well. That's really informative for us. And yeah, we love doing this kind of work. We've been doing work in the analytics space since 2014 with tools like Tableau and Power BI and Alteryx, to name a few. If you personally need any sort of mentoring in this space, if your organization is, looking for some additional hands on deck, or maybe even making a transition, right, from Tableau to Power BI. We'd love to be able to help you there as well. So you have our contact info here on the screen, start@onenumber.biz. We would love to jump in with you and see if we'd be able to help. So thank you so much. We make content like this every single week, so feel free to follow along, and we hope to see you here again really soon. Thanks.